Yeah. Okay. Hopefully now my phone won't. Yeah. You got it.
Okay. Do you need to do a sound test or anything for you guys?
That was a song. Oh, wait, oh, there it is. Okay. Hello. Oh, that's crazy. It just hello. It doesn't want to.
Do you want to pause that?
Don't pound on it.
Just hold these very quickly and pause that really quick so I can go speak to the gentleman first.
It just is barely seated. Hello. See, that works. Yeah, this is just barely connecting. Okay. Yeah, it's a bad connection. Oh. Yeah, you have to hold it closed. Oh, you have to press. I could put some gap tape on it.
It's the lip roll. Okay, you guys ready?
Ready.
Stacia, are you ready?
Give a thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Good afternoon, everyone who can hear me here on the beautiful East Side Trail at Ponce City Market. My name is Miranda Kyle. I'm the Arts and Culture Program Manager for Atlanta BeltLine Inc. and I curate the annual Art on the Atlanta BeltLine Public Art Exhibition. With me today is 2/3 of our artists in residence, Flight of Swallows. And today we'll be talking a little bit about their process and what they're doing for us this season as part of their residency. So I'm actually going to turn it over to y'all to introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of background on Flight of Swallows and how y'all came to be, and a little bit of your conceptual praxis. And we'll come from there. And Dacia, feel free to chime in whenever you want.
Yeah, Dacia, do you want me to introduce? Would you like to introduce yourself first, Dacia?
Sure. My name is Dacia Oliver. I co-founded Flight of Swallows with Sadie a while ago. I mainly play cello. I've played a lot with a bunch of different bands in town and groups and dance companies and theater companies. And yes, I think that's it.
We'll give Dacia a little bit of a break since she's under the weather. Sadie, that means you have to do the big, long introduction.
Okay. My name is Sadie. My performer name is Sadie Hawkins. My name is Sadie Simons. Yeah, as Dacia said, we co-founded the group in 2008, 9, 10, 2010, I think. And
2009 going
2009,
into 2010.
yeah.
Yes.
And we've had sort of a rotating cast. We've been like an open relationship of people, and Dacia and I got our relationship with Anne-Marie in 2012-ish, and we all enjoyed working together and became a core group of 3 instead of a core group of 2. And yeah, that's pretty much our history. We've been BeltLine artists before. We've had 3 shows on the BeltLine in different places. And yeah, Anne-Marie wanted to have the idea of applying for the residency so that we could go a little deeper. Oh, I guess it's my turn then. Hi, I'm Anne-Marie. I am the latest edition of Swallows, although that means that I've been here for 10 years. Yeah. Wow.
Also,
So my background's a little bit different. I'm an engineer, and so a lot of the technology aspects of Flight of Swallows are things that I brought to it. Some of the bigger construction elements. My performance training is mainly as an aerialist and a little bit of ground dance. All sorts of dance. But mostly, yeah, with the residency, we kind of made a decision that what we wanted to do was not going to fit into a normal scope. So we should just might as well go for it and apply for the residency. So we did.
Amazing. And you three each come from very distinct performative backgrounds. You talked about, got that mix of science and art, you know. Sadie, you're a pretty avid outdoors person too. Like you were paddleboarding this morning or
Right. Yeah.
whatever, some adventuring this morning. And you know, Daisha is this polymathic musician.
Yep.
And so this combination, when you guys were thinking about the residency program, which gives you 12 months to kind of explore and research and really dig into a concept, what were y'all seeing as the hope for this residency program? Like, what did you, we'll talk about the beginning. When you went into the residency, what were you like, we're gonna do this thing? What was that vision like?
We had, so we had the idea of, man, like a performance a month, maybe more than that. I think we had like 13 lined up and our original concept was kind of like turning the BeltLine almost into a clock, and we would do something at each of the, you know, sort of the closest to a place. And then it became like, okay, well, maybe we'll do 4. And we ended up, you know, in working with you, we came to 3. And that was good curation on your part. Yeah, please.
Yeah, we had a whole list of things that we wanted to do. We kind of had our own personal wish lists and desires for things that we felt that we needed support in order to be able to legally do in a public space. A real talk, like some of the things that we are doing here, you can do when people do it in public spaces, but a lot of times they do it not exactly in the most black and white of legal circumstances. So understanding that, you know, we came up with our mutual lists things, like, all right, to try to make it make sense. And it came, you know, we tried to originally think it out as, let's do a series of experiments in the BeltLine. And that's where we came up with a very long list of things. And then when it became, no, really, we want you to, it has to be more than just a series of experiments. We want you to like remain in a place and really think about it instead of it being like a hit and run, if you will. But there are some artists that are perfectly legit artists that do that. They come in, they run in a day, conceive, execute, perform, and then they're gone. And that is their entire point. But for us, we're trying to balance between that. How do you maximize the effectiveness of this residency for us? And I think this, for us, for this residency, is to find our collective voice without stomping down any one of us.
Yeah, and I'll just take that one.
So, yeah, everything that we've developed has been very site specific, and you know, the challenge of finding sites was a whole thing that, you know, required scouting, but also guidance. And I think the 3 places that we ended up with were really fun for us to come up with ideas. And each has very different activation, very different like physical components of it. But yeah.
A little closer, so it's easier for us to shuffle this microphone around.
So in this process, you know, we give our residents like 6 months of research time and then 6 months of execution time. It can be challenging to work in the public realm instead of on a private residence or in a gallery or a museum, because there's so many rules to working in the public, like you alluded to, Anne-Marie. So as far as challenges go, I would love to hear what were some of like the roughest or maybe your favorite challenges that you guys overcame through the process.
Shall we start with number 1, which is the sea thing? The thing.
The water?
Well, no. the COVID thing.
Oh,
Yeah, that was a major challenge for us, just working around. Because at the time that we submitted, we were deeply in masks and we didn't know if we were going to be locked down. We didn't know if we could gather. We didn't know, at the time that we did our conceptions for what our residency was going to consist of, it looked like experiments, partially because like we can't have a mass gathering. Like, yeah, maybe it needs to be a hit and run precisely for the fact that you can't have 50 people standing here watching us. Like, that's not a thing. But then, you know, as we got more into, okay, things are loosening up, we can have people all in the same place. It's not just going to be dance to camera, which, you know, we also considered that possibility, that all of this was going to be a video project.
Right.
So, you know, once we got to the point of, no, this really is going to be a live performance, there really is going to be an audience, what does that mean for us who want to do spontaneous performance? Now we entered into another realm, which is, okay, COVID is still a thing. And at this point, you know, within the last month,
two of us had it.
two of us have had it. And the third one is nervous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that was definitely, I mean, we had to reschedule because of it. And, you know, here we're having sort of a hybrid,
Digital.
digital hybrid event also because of it. But it made rehearsal and everything very, you know, we were meeting virtually until the first of the year. Yeah, because it wasn't like great weather to be outside and try to like sit and meet and, you know, do ideation together. So we did a lot of ideation, you know, in Zoom calls or whatever.
And it's challenging when you're physical.
Yeah, it's very challenging when you're physical. And there's been times that we've meant to do a full rehearsal with all of us virtual, and it doesn't work. Not for how the three of us work together.
Right.
Well, not just that, like the physicality of the BeltLine is just a challenge in and of itself when you consider the April activation. It was cold.
Yeah.
It was very cold, and we were very much not in the sun.
Oh, sorry.
Under an overpass. And, you know, rigging. So we're climbing around up under the infrastructure, trying to figure out how you're going to make this happen. And we had a very ambitious rigging.
Without anchors too.
Yeah.
Because you can't drill into anything on the belt.
Can't drill into
Yeah.
anything. And you have to set it up, basically, you can't leave it there. So whatever happens has to happen that morning before the show. And we have a very tight crew. So we were doing our own rigging right before it's go time. So you had that aspect. Then you had the entire weather aspect. So in April, it was very cold, like
And windy.
like 40.
Yeah.
It was like 38 on one of the rehearsal
Earlier, we
days.
were having that conversation that like being a public artist also means the weather is one of
Yeah.
your collaborators, you know?
The May show, where
That's
the entire May show
Yeah.
flooded. Like, so on our original performance date, that was the day we had to cancel due to one of us being sick. Was this one? So we had our planned rain date, which of course the entire week before it was raining, pouring. So we went from having seen it be, you know, perfect, great conditions in the tunnel for performing
And we had
to
set up-
ocean.
Yeah, and we had like, in previous weeks, we had set up all of our like stagey, like all of our stage dressing.
And like we had built the site and everything, and then it rained and the topography completely changed. But one of the things that came out of that though is it made for really great photos because the reflection on, you know, with the light coming through the tunnel and the reflections, and it became also, and like we danced in the water and we splashed with the music, and you made it part of, it was a collaborator too, instead of just a huge pain.
So
As you guys are now Art on the Beltline veterans in general, and you're now also residency veterans, we're amping up for your final 2 performances of your residency with us. In this idea of the weather and the environment as collaborator, I would love for you guys to talk about like takeaways for your practice moving forward, like what you feel like this residency has done or damaged as far as like your collaboration or your practice, or how y'all are navigating that collaboration in a post-residency universe of Flight of Swallows.
Sure, yeah. Daisha, do you have thoughts on this? I don't know. Yeah,
Um,
you're recording.
I have
Okay.
thoughts, but I have a hard time putting words together. Right now.
It's okay. So I think our biggest development and our biggest takeaway from our residency is having better communication amongst ourselves. We had never worked in quite this way before, and we, as people do when they're colleagues with people, you get into like a comfort, and you get into making assumptions about how your colleagues process, or how they like to do project management, or just all of that. And like different people need different space before and after a performance, and the 3 of us all process very differently, and our bodies want different things. And so we'd never really talked about it before, and through this we were forced to. Like, we had some difficult conversations about like what each of us needs, and they're conversations that we would have never had otherwise. And so I think it has provided us an opportunity to strengthen our professional and creative relationships with each other. Yeah, and also just like what our process of ideation is. We still have a hard time with the articulation of goals and vision statement, and the more like businessy oriented part of it. But I think the interpersonal relationship part of it has been really important. And working as a trio is by its nature complicated, I think, too. And just navigating it was rough for a minute, and then it wasn't. Like, we're figuring it out, and we've all learned how to, I think, talk about our own needs, and also like be aware of other people, our collaborators' needs a little more too. And it means that there's negotiations that happen, and just like how we had to negotiate on our dates and sites and all that. I mean, it's a similar thing. Yeah.
I think we talked about it yesterday when we were actually at Montgomery Ferry, the 3rd activation site, that it's different if the artist in residence were basically a individual who was running a company, who basically you have a creative director that says, okay, this is what I want, and all of you are going to do it, and this is what I want, you do this.
Yeah.
It's one thing, but here we have a situation where we essentially have 3 equally empowered and very different artists that are attempting a unified vision. And when you have that, and you have 3 equally strong and opinionated and valid opinions going on, how do you turn that into something that's fully unified? And when it comes together, what you are seeing is not, oh, this is the Daisha show, this is the Anne Marie show, this is the Sadie show. Like, how does it be, this is a Flight of Swallows show, and while you can see one of us pop up to the surface and it's like, okay, that's a her, that's a Daisha moment. There's you see, there it is, right there. That, you know, even if you see that, you're still like, this was not an individual effort. You can see the collective voice emerge. And I think that was, for us, it's the challenge of what we're trying to do, just because we can't run and say like, well, I'm the creative director on this.
Yeah.
Like, it isn't like that. It can't be, because we each have separate and distinct functions, but we also have thoughts on how that could best showcase the other stuff.
Yeah.
And whether or not the others want their stuff showcased in that way is a discussion in and of itself. Daisha?
It's kind of like talking to God. You're just like, Daisha, are you there?
I'm here. I'm sorry. Hi.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I wanted to make sure you had a moment if you wanted to express. I think, yeah.
Yeah, Deja, we know you're not feeling well. We're just happy you're here with us in spirit. We'll just continue to treat you like our spiritual overseer for the rest of this process. So
Now that is perfect. Bow to me. No.
So in curating a group of very strong personalities, I was excited at how much y'all challenged me. You know, no, seriously. And I think that this is important, right? Because a lot of times with the residents that we work with, you know, they are coming in as a singular entity with a focus, and they kind of know what they want. And I'm just mostly like guiding them through the bureaucracy and with, you know, our weekly or bi-weekly check-ins to make sure their vision stays like on track. And because everyone comes into this residency program with like, this is my idea, and it's like ginormous, and we're like, okay, let's bring it into something smaller. But with y'all being that trio of very experienced expertise with like really powerful visions, it helped me refine how I critique, work with, encourage in a group setting, right? So I wanted to thank you guys because you've made me better in this process, which is really wonderful. So we've got a couple more performances, end of the month. What is next? What's post-residency Flight of Swallows look like? Dun, dun, dun.
I haven't thought that far in advance. I'm really just thinking about how to make it through the next 2.5 weeks. I'm being really, really honest here. I have no other plans. My only plan is to make it through the next 2.5 weeks, because our first performance is in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Just under 2 weeks.
Y'all want to talk about that a little bit? Like what people
Do
can
you want to talk
expect?
about your future plans, or do you just want to talk about the next 2 weeks?
Or we could just talk about the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so my take on our future plans is we're gonna take what we had ideated for this and see what of that we can continue on, and how what we have done can be, like, originally we had this idea of like we would have like all of these would be segments that would then become a final show, like chapters, and then there's the whole thing. And that's not what happened. And so it's like, I think we're going to have that conversation if we want to kind of revisit and rework things to make another show, or do we want to do a show? And, you know, because that's been a whole conversation too about what is a show and what, you know, whatever. But our next two performances,
3. We have iDrum on the 15th.
we have iDrum on the 15th, yeah, which is actually, it's basically a rehearsal for one of the things that we're doing for the our performance at Montgomery Ferry.
That's exciting.
So we're gonna rehearse one of the components of that activation. Oh, and that's a thing.
And we're nestled in between 2 really great bands too. Thank you, Daniel DeSimone and Face of Knives. And then we've got our 2 performances back to back on the 25th and 26th, right?
Yes.
So we need everyone to Uber Eats
Right. So yeah, our performance on the 15th is a rehearsal for one of the components of our performance on the 25th at Montgomery Ferry. And we've been doing, we yesterday did our first on-site actual like physical rehearsal there, and which lots of passersby were just like, why are you
hanging from that bridge?
Yeah, why are you hanging from the bridge? So that's fun, and it's also very interesting how each of the different parts of the BeltLine, their traffic is different, and the way that people react to something unexpected. It's kind of fun. But
It feels like a theme.
Yeah.
For you guys' residency is a reaction to the unexpected.
Reaction to the unexpected, indeed. Yeah. So yeah, we're doing activations at Montgomery Ferry on Saturday the 25th, and then Sunday the 26th. It's our rain date for the tunnel on the south side, and we're gonna do it again.
Hopefully with less water.
Hopefully with less water.
However, rain or no rain,
Uh-huh.
the tunnel's flooded or not, we're still gonna try it. Because one of the things that this residency has taught us is that we can still be artists no matter what it looks like, but we just need to understand what our goals are. Because some of the things that we had in mind would work if it were perfect conditions, but you can't count on that here. So some of the things, what our parameters are, like what is an acceptable, what are our limits for, what we can do a performance in? Temperature's a thing, rain's a thing, and if it's too wet, you can't have all the electronics. What can you do then? As we have rigging, sometimes you can't rig. Like there were, if you were to ask them, they would solidly say the only reason I applied for the residency was that so I could rig from bridges.
I've heard that.
They
I've heard that a couple times.
Yeah, that's yeah. So, but 2 out of the 3 of our performances involved rigging off of things, but one of them didn't. And it's important that we do these because I'm not just the let's rig off of a bridge gal, and
Sadie's face says you're lying.
Not just.
I'm also that.
Yes,
I'm
also
also that, but I can also be other things.
How are you? Hi. Oh, thank you. Those are beautiful. Those are really beautiful. Oh, I have one more question for you.
So, jokes about rigging around bridges aside, sometimes as a performance artist, especially in public art, especially on BeltLine, in tons of these different places with different types of traffic, sometimes there's no audience. Sometimes there is an audience. How does that informed y'all's work, this idea of observer, no observer?
For me, I like I mean, they always know that if there's some random group on hoverboards whistling, I'm going to giggle and enjoy that and want to play cello alongside it. If there's nobody there, then there's nobody there and I'm just playing within the environment. There's always something going on, whether there's an audience or not, I think in the grander schema of things. And the very nature of being in a public environment is that it's just that, it's public. So there's no like you can't hide. There's no hiding on that tunnel, for instance, like you're there. So you either decide you're going to play with the environment or you're going to try to make, or you can make a conscious decision to not play with the environment, to be absolutely against it. But then that would go against what the parameters of working on the Beltline even need, which, you know, at the very basic, you know, you need to allow to have people be able to cut through and utilize the belt line. So our performance cannot hinder the environment, only enhance it. And I think regardless if there's a bunch of people or if there's one person or if there's nobody, I mean, it for me, it doesn't necessarily make or break the performance, but it has the potential to enhance either way.
I think for us, for this residency, at least for me, we had always planned to have heavy video elements, so we made sure that we had someone recording our activations, you know, as possible, not necessarily all the rehearsals, but definitely the performances. There was someone recording. There was always something watching, but whether or not you have a live audience definitely changes the dynamic of performing, you know, dancing to camera, and performing to camera is a different experience than performing to a live audience. And you have to be more, it's just a different way of viewing it, because you know that the experience of how the work is going to exist, you know, what the end result is, if it's a live experience versus, you know, a recorded experience that itself is going to be curated by us as we're editing the video later on, and how we want the camera to move through the space, or if it's just a static recording of, you know, a record of the event, one shot. It's very different, and thinking about how that plays out and what our options are, because we won't necessarily know what situation we're going to find ourselves in, because we didn't know if any audience was going to show up for April or May or June, for that matter. We really don't know who's going to be there. So we just have to, you know, obviously we want to make the most of the opportunities that we have with the space, but we also don't want to be so married to the concept of what that is going to play out as, that we've lost the opportunity for the magic.
And in each of our 3 locations, we had, we've had different relationships with the Beltline, the physical entity of the Beltline. So our first one, we were to the side, and our May and then the end of June activation, we are literally in the middle of a tunnel, in the middle of the path. And, you know, people were navigating around us, and the sound of them going by was apart, and, you know, just our physical location versus their physical location. And so it was immersive in its own way. So definitely not a stage. Our first activation was the closest to having a stage of any of them, and we set it up like a stage. And then our final one is sort of a hybrid of the two, because we're engaging on the path, not necessarily beside the path, but just to the very edge of the path. And That has been interesting. And so the interaction with people is a lot of like, we're going to hear you if you have feedback about us making your life harder. Because there was some that of, you know, getting in people's ways with some vehicles and whatever, and you know, being mindful of like, we're all in this together, and it's a cooperative experience.
And that's interesting because on the
trails that are not paved, the interim trails, right? We have always put sculpture smack in the middle of the trail, always, since the beginning of Atlanta BeltLine. And it's interesting to hear the feedback between an active and a passive piece of public art, right? And how people engage with that. We have a giant sculpture on the South Side Trail that's like smack in the middle of the trail. And everybody's like, oh, that's nice, because traffic going one way goes on one side and traffic the other way goes the other, but it doesn't move.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really interesting to hear that feedback from passive, active, how people engage with it.
Yeah, for the May performance, what was kind of fun is the installation is designed as a series of gates. And some people found that delightful.
Yeah.
Absolutely delightful. They were excited to ride through our gates.
Yeah, it was an obstacle course.
They loved it. But others, you know,
Saw them as barriers.
yeah, it depends on how you're looking at it, and depends on, you know, what your personal encounter is at that particular moment. And, you know, when thinking about it as, you know, public art, you don't have, it is not for us to control what their perception is of the situation. And their viewpoint is also valid, and their experience of it. And meanwhile, we're also recording. We have to understand that, you know, they may not be a willing participant in this, and that's something that we're understanding. So, you know, just when you have, you know, the audience as not necessarily willing collaborator.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, the consent issue is like a whole.
Public art is a constant consent negotiation.
Yeah.
Right. And
That consent negotiation is ongoing, especially with performance artists who are doing a sort of like very highly engaged version of public art. So looking forward to these performances in 2 weeks. What are some things you would want an audience to bring to that performance, either in their heart or in their noodle? You know, what I think would be your hopes for the engagement you're looking for?
Me first.
I'm here for asking the hard question.
hitting questions, and I give it right to her.
It's like openness and yes, I think is the, you know, just, I think my favorite experience is the people who like honestly didn't know that something was happening, and they stumble on it and they're just like, oh, this is weird, I want to watch it. Yeah, and like, I love that. And I just the willingness to take a minute and experience a thing that's never going to happen that same way ever again. And it's an opportunity to have a shared experience with the performers and the people who are there with you, and that opportunity for that specific thing will never happen again. And like, yeah, that openness is what I would hope for people.
I think what I'd like people to come into our last 2 performances on is this idea of the art is the experience of seeing it and creating it, and that it's a tunnel, yes, or it's an overpass, yes, but it could also be all sorts of other things. And you know, we're going to use the walls as a floor, and we're going to be you know, doing some things on there, and the audience may very well find themselves as a piece of art, whether or not they understand it. They exist in a space that is appreciated by all, and they are, in a sense, you know, just as we're, you know, sitting here watching the BeltLine right now, we're watching people go by. They are part of a living scenery. They're part of a living art space, and they, by virtue of being on it, are part of the art.
Daisha? Daisha?
Daisha?
I went first.
All right, so folks can see y'all last weekend of the month, 25th at Montgomery Ferry and 26th at the McDonough Tunnel on the South Side Trail. What time are we starting on those days? Two-ish. 2 to 5-ish. Time is a line circle. Show up in the afternoon.
It's definitely more activation than show.
Activation and show. So come with snacks, right?
Come with snacks. It's
Bring a chair.
What was that, Daisha?
Bring a chair and your own water.
Yeah. Chair, water, bug spray, snacks. Awesome. Well, Flight of Swallows, Daisha and Marie, Sadie, thank you guys so much for your time and having this conversation. And I hope that everyone joins us out on the trail at the end of the month. Thanks so much.
Bye, Daisha.
Bye, guys.